I mean, I think the Chinese car companies are extremely competitive. By far, our toughest competition is in China. If you're out there who think like the top 10 car companies are going to be Tesla, followed by 9 Chinese car companies, I think they might not be wrong. China is super good at manufacturing, and the work ethic is incredible.
By far, the biggest competitors to Tesla in the race to electric vehicles will not be the legacy automakers from either the US, Europe, or Japan. Rather, it's clear now that the Chinese automakers are the ones to watch. Today, we have an insider who'll do a deep dive explaining the Chinese electric vehicles brands to watch, the main players like BYD, Li Auto, and Huawei, their progress to date, and a view on what happens when they eventually get a foothold in both exports and actually setting up factories in the US and Europe. We're joined by Alexandra Merz, an ex-fund manager from Europe, and is known in the Tesla retail community as TeslaBoomerMama. She's joined by Frank. Frank has worked at both big tech and startups across the US, as well as China and Southeast Asia. You can follow Frank on X as Ming Dynasty. Welcome, Alexandra. Welcome, Frank. Thank you both for joining me.
Great to be here.
Thank you for the opportunity, Herbert. Thank you for all the work you've done for the Tesla community.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. I appreciate you. And the work that you did doing a deep dive in the Chinese EV market, this is a big deal for us Tesla investors. We know that China is important. Why don't you start us off? Tell us why you felt that doing a deep dive in China EV market is very important for Tesla.
Okay, so basically, Tesla has been doing a great job in the last, since its founding. And increasingly in the last few years, people are getting a sense of that they are facing some pretty tough competition in one particular market, that is China. And in the last Deal Book Summit that took place in November, Elon Musk actually said specifically that by far the toughest competition is in China. And according to him, some people say that the future top 10 car companies are going to be Tesla, followed by 9 Chinese car companies. And he thinks that they might not be wrong. So increasingly, the Tesla community is starting to pay attention to China and wants to know what's happening in that particular market. And given that I'm a Tesla investor since 2016, and given my background, I've been starting to pay more attention to that particular market as well. So I thought, given the interest in the community, then this is also my opportunity to add value to the community. So I reached out to Alexandra, and we had a call, and she felt the information might be relevant to the bigger community. So here we are.
Perfect. How about you, Alexandra? Do you want to just do a quick intro here?
Sure, but that's exactly it. So I started, as you know, sometimes on the Cyberball, sometimes in a special, talking about Chinese cars. But I also put out there that, I'm working on it. So if somebody can help, I'm most grateful. And that's when Frank reached out and said, how about we do a call? He did the presentation. It was a little bit shorter than that we're doing today. And I said, this would be great to share with everybody because I think this is really going to be of good interest.
Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to talk about the China macro that's happening for electric vehicles. Man, they've been giving incentives. They're promoting it. They're the leader in the world for the adoption of electric vehicles. You're going to give us an overview of the progress of electric vehicles so far. And then what we're interested in is the EV main players. So we're going to do a spotlight on BYD, Li Auto, Huawei. Everybody seems to be jumping right now with BYD being important because in this particular quarter, they may or may not have just, surpassed Tesla's volume in electric vehicles. But we're going to show people that there's a real big difference between BYD and Tesla. And then you're going to talk about this, which is the thing we're all interested to find out: electric vehicle export, right? Can China break out of Shanghai and China and get into Europe? Can they get into the North American market? And then what to watch for in 2024. Great agenda. Appreciate that. Let's get started with the macro markets. What's happening in China?
I think by this time, most Tesla community members know that China's EV market has been growing exponentially in the last several years. So if you want to think about why that's happening, maybe we can start by looking at the macro factors that's been propelling that particular surge. So from a demand side, we can look at the economy, the consumers, and then the government policy. And then we can also touch on the supply side, right? So if you look at the Chinese economy, right now is growing at about 5%. It's actually slower than the growth rate before COVID, but still much faster than most of the economies in the world, right? So that provides the overall landscape for the EV growth. And then if you look at the car ownership in China, it's still relatively low at only about 20%, right? That leaves a lot of upside. And then from a consumer demand point of view, you can see that the rise of the gig economy, particularly ride hailing and food deliveries, and when people get into that business, the most economic vehicle for them to use is actually EVs versus the ICEs. And then from just the Chinese consumers' pattern point of view, they are typically pretty open to adoptions of new technologies. If you think about the mobile payments in the past or the current EVs phenomenon, they're really early adopters in many ways. And then now let's look at the government policies. So the Chinese government has announced their goal of reaching carbon emission peak by 2030. To achieve that, they've been implementing a host of policies, including building up nationwide charging network and rolling out subsidies for EV purchases. And most importantly, maybe a very unique thing, but a very effective thing in China is actually they implement these caps for annual new vehicle registrations. And then basically what that means is that for you to get a registration after you purchase a car, you have to go through this auction system, paying about $12 to $15,000 more to actually get your license to start driving. However, the key here is that such a caps only apply to the ICEs, but not the EVs, which basically means that after you buy the EV, you can start driving immediately versus the ICEs, right? So you can imagine the amount of incentive this provides. So all of these are on the demand side, and on the supply side, which is that we are seeing a lot of models from dozens of players in this space across a wide range of price points, right? That provides a very strong attractions to the consumers to actually buy an EV. Does that kind of make sense?
It
Oh
does,
my
and
God,
I find it particularly interesting. In the US, it's an incentive that's a deduction of the price, while in China, it's a malus, meaning you have to pay more if you want to have an ICE, which is much more painful, right? I mean, can you imagine, especially in the price ranges that usually Chinese cars are, to suddenly have to put $12,000 to $15,000 more on the table just to get your registration for your car.
significant amount of dollars, and I did not know about this registration thing. Thank you for sharing that information. No wonder electric vehicles is going crazy in China, and they started early. Let's continue
They started
on.
early. They are early adopters. They are very tech savvy, and only 20% have a car. There is such a huge market still.
Man.
Yes, indeed. So far, there's been incredible progress. If you look at one of the key metric of EV adoption, that is the penetration rate of new car sales. Basically, China has already crossed the 40% penetration rate, right, as of December. So basically, out of every 10 cars purchased, more than four of them actually EVs. So that translates to about 1.1 million cars sold in December. Out of that, about 85% is domestic and about 15% is export. That's 45%, 48% growth year on year.
Fantastic stat. Okay, 40% penetration rate. That's huge. We're going to get there.
So see, this is the graph that shows the EV volume since January 2020, which is about 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. So you can see the exponential growth trend here, and there seemed to be some kind of acceleration in the last 6 months. If you see the hockey stick there at the end.
Yeah, and they're also, this is over 4 years, and so we will probably now see again the January hole. There seems always to be a moment at the beginning of the year where it comes down, but it very quickly recuperates. Obviously, we know as Tesla investors that Tesla's numbers at that moment are dedicated to the export market, but there seems to be a general phenomenon that after the year end to have a slower market, which is true in some way in North America and Europe as well.
Okay, so what's the difference between...
quickly, the January dip every year is actually due to Chinese New Year, where the whole country pretty much shuts down for about 2 weeks.
True.
Gotcha.
You're right.
So January or February. Okay, what's the difference between this chart and this one right here?
This is the penetration rate. Basically, take the EV volume divided by the total passenger sales in the market,
Percentage.
right? You can see that they started about 8-9% about 3 years ago, and it's crossed 40% as of last month.
Do you think that the U.S. will follow this? That this is where we're at right now at 8%? Do you think that this is going to follow this?
An EV in China includes plug-in hybrids. So it's not really comparable to what we have as pure battery electric vehicles in the United States, where we're around 7 to 8%, 9% now, hopefully. But sure, I mean, we all hope that the US finally catches up. In the middle of the two, you have Europe, which is now at 20%.
Okay, good.
I think you'll get there. It's just a matter of how long. And then I think it certainly helps if the administration also rolls out the registration cap and auction.
Okay, I love this next slide. So you actually break down all the different electric vehicle makers in China, but you do it based on backgrounds, which is very cool. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so just in case people wonder, what type of players actually are behind the macro graphs we saw just now. Actually, if you dig deep into them, you realize there are actually whole varieties of background that capture them, right? So by my count, there are in total about 9 types of background, right? Let's go through them one by one quickly. First, we have the domestic pure EVs with the familiar names of NIO, XPeng, Li Auto, and Li Motor. And then we have the domestic legacy players trying to transition to EVs, including both the private enterprises and state-owned enterprises, right? So we have the names of BYD, Geely, Great Wall. These are the 3 private enterprises. And then we have Chang'an and GAC, Guangzhou Automotive, which are state enterprises. And then we have joint venture legacy makers like the Shanghai Automotive and GM joint venture in China. And we have wholly owned foreign enterprise, where we only have Tesla in that particular category. Yeah. And then we have foreign import, which we only right now have Lucid, who announced a few months ago that they want to start importing their EVs into China, and maybe later on go with a more local OEM approach, but they will start with import. And then we have the tech hybrids. By that, I mean basically the usual tech giants like Huawei and Xiaomi, who have been playing other lanes, but now jump into the EV lane. We'll cover Huawei in more details later. And then we have the foreign brands try to OEM through China, such as Volkswagen. Their announcement about taking a stake in XPeng, asked them to make models for them. And then we also have Stellantis taking about 20% stake in Leap Motor, a private EV startup, and also claim the export right of Leap Motor outside of China. And then we have the pure software players, which are the Baidu's and Tencent of the world, who are trying to design local autonomous driving software. And we also have Pony.ai, which is, I believe, a Silicon Valley startup, but based out of China. And there are quite a few of them, but the Pony.ai stuck with their mind because of their name.
And they're in partnership, excuse me to interrupt you, they're in partnership with Toyota, if I remember right.
Okay. And then we have foreign alliances, like things you really don't see outside of China, such as the alliance between Mercedes and BMW. And they have announced their partnership to build charging network in China. So that's something you probably don't see very often anywhere else. So
Frank, yeah.
In summary, so you can see we have a whole varieties of players with different backgrounds trying to jostle in this hyper competitive market.
Oh, Frank, thank you for putting this together. I swear I thought I knew the Chinese auto market, but this is brilliant. Oh my gosh. I am going to put this up share it more often. Now, I liked your little little footnotes here, right? So Xpeng is what you called it, but that's short for Xiaopeng. As you say, it's called Little Rock. That's what it means. It's a mythical bird. You've got GAC. It stands for Guangzhou. SAIC, Shanghai Automotive Industry. I don't remember what that was called. And then Xiaomi, Little Millet. Fantastic. Thank you for putting this together. I could spend hours
it
just
makes
on
your head
this
spring,
slide.
doesn't it?
It does, but I like the way you did this. It's very important that we understand this.
And I think it's also important to understand there were many more smaller ones that have already closed shop. So this is still a very evolving market. I do believe all of these players are obviously now established enough to continue on. But this has been a very rough 5 years where some other people stuck their head out and had to close shop between.
I love this. Okay, let's keep moving. But I think I'll want to come back to this and think about it again. But let's keep going. Tell me more.
There's so much to come, Herbert.
I know.
Yeah. So so after the confusing or head spinning slide just now, let's look at the top guys out of the whole pack, right? Which are the top players by volume? So one thing that jumps up to me when I look at the top 10 are they're all pretty much new names, which means that names that you have never heard before or not so familiar with. But then what's important is to realize which name is actually missing from the top 10. We'll see, right? So basically the usual suspects of Toyota, Volkswagen, Stellantis, Ford, so on and so forth. These legacy makers and their JVs in China, they have completely fallen off the chart, so to speak, right? So, and then BYD, which is getting a lot of attention lately, they're in a way in the league of their own with a monthly sales about 260,000 in November, and with a 50-50 split between the plug-in hybrid and the pure EV or battery EV, and others, including Tesla, they are producing about 65 to 20,000 EVs per month, right? And then for BYD, about 10% of the total volume is actually export, and Tesla is about 40% volume is for export. So we'll look at these numbers in detail in the following graphs.
Okay, I'm just a little confused. Why would you do it this way? 65 to 20,000. Like that's like, what does this mean? Like Tesla China is 65, and then the others are somewhere in between them?
Yeah, so there's the other 9 after BYD are selling about 20 to 65,000 a month, while BYD is selling 4 times that of Tesla. Of course, half of it is hybrid.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll dive a little closer to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you got two tables. Let's go take a look. Mostly new names. This is brilliant. Okay, let's take November 2023.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have the number for December, but if you look at November, a month earlier, so BYD is selling over 260,000 per month, and then Tesla is number 2, selling 65, and then Geely, which is the number 3, which belongs to the private, who's actually the owner of Volvo, and belongs to the the private enterprise, the private legacy bucket. If we tie back to that 9 category slide, so is the private legacy bucket, and then followed by the Shanghai GM JV, which is a very I would say an inexpensive car, which still goes for about $5,000-$6,000 equivalent in China.
The Wuling,
probably unsafe car. It's a mini car, but it's selling a lot. And I don't know how much pride actually a GM takes in this particular product.
Just because there's such a big number of it. Again, with this chart, careful, this is NEVs. So for example, BYD, half that volume is plug-in hybrids, half of it is pure battery electric vehicles. Tesla, obviously, all is battery electric. And then the next one that is all electric, correct me, Frank, but it's Li Auto, right? That's the next one. That's pure battery electric. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. And then the Guangzhou Ion, which follows Li Auto, that's a state-owned enterprise legacy. And then Great Wall following GAC, and that's a private enterprise legacy. And then the next one is Series, which is actually a partnership with Huawei, which we'll cover later on. And that's a private enterprise legacy. And then we have Xiaopeng, which is a pure EV startup.
Okay. Thank you for pointing out that this is NEV.
Yeah, indeed, pretty new names, right?
All new names. I mean, obviously, Alexandra and I have been following Tesla Chinese market, so we recognize these. But I tell you, 99% of people won't even know any of these names ever. Nope. Except for BYD. I think that has broken through, and everybody knows BYD's name now. Oh, God, I love this. Okay, so this is January to November. So we just thought November. This is like year to date.
This is year to date.
Yeah.
11 months.
Pretty much, pretty much the same names. The only difference I want to point out is actually the last one, the Leap motor at the bottom of the pack. That's the Stellantis investment.
20%, yes.
20%. And they also have Leap Motors export right going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so basically Stellantis' presence in China is through Leap Motor. Leap Motor just puts Stellantis badge on it, but it's their cars. And then if Stellantis wants to sell a car outside of China, Leap Motor gets to create that car too. Right?
I'm not even sure they rebrand yet. I think it's just a 20% participation that they took in their stock.
Okay. Whoa, okay, BYD. Whoa, this is a big, long slide here.
Very interesting. You will see.
Okay.
Yeah. So sorry about the eyesore here, but BYD is indeed a very interesting and fascinating company, and therefore it takes a few words to describe. But next section, we're going to go into a bit more details on 3 of the top 10 players. I think each one representing a unique type of background in the pack, right? So we start with BYD. So BYD, a lot of people probably heard of this name. It stands for Build Your Dreams, and it has a fascinating journey growing from a very niche battery maker to one of the leading players in the global energy transition. So basically, if I go through their background very quickly, they were founded in 1995 by a chemist as a rechargeable battery maker, the supplier for Nokia and Motorola for their phones. And then they made an entry to the automobile industry in 2003 by acquiring a small Chinese state enterprise. And then they started focusing on electric vehicles starting in 2008, launched the world's first mass-produced plug-in hybrid car, and then as a result, attracting investment from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's Berkshire Hathaway, with $230 million for a 10% stake. So if they have held the whole stake by now, that's a 30x return. And then they introduced the first BEV in 2009, first fully electric car, and then they start diversifying into buses, trucks, and solar panels starting in 2010. And then they also, during the same period of time, they also went through a rapid global expansion and entered the international markets. And then by 2020, they have become an expert in battery making and invented the Blade battery, which is an LFP battery, but offering some advantages, especially in safety. So far, they have become by this time, they have become the number 2 battery supplier in the world. I don't know how many people know this statistic.
After Cattle, right? Cattle is number 1.
Correct. After Cattle. I believe Cattle has about 40% of the market share, and then BYD has about 20% of the market share. So, and by the way, they're also a supplier to Tesla. And then in March 2022, they made a decision to stop producing any ICEs going forward and completely focus on EVs. And then at the same time, they further diversified into solar power and energy storage solutions. You can see that the company is really playing multiple lanes, but they will be competing or collaborating with Tesla mostly on EV, battery, and energy storage solutions going forward.
Exactly.
So,
But what's really astonishing is that it's exactly the different pathway than Tesla, right? They started with batteries, they started with ICE cars, they moved then slowly into EVs, actually also from the lower price point. Tesla, obviously, we all know, is completely the difference. They started with the Roadster, then went down to the S and the X, then went down to the 3, and now the Y, and now soon the $25,000 car. So it's just a completely different trajectory in terms of how the whole business was built up.
Okay, so a couple points. One is they're stopping ICE production since 2022, but does that mean they're going to
They
stop
did.
the hybrids? The hybrids.
Oh, they consider the pure hybrid, the hybrids NEV in China. So for them, it's the same category, new electric vehicles like
So
EVs.
they're still going to do that. They'll
50-50 at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, they'll still do that, but they're going to stop this. And I mean, I think what I was impressed with here is that, they decided to do electric vehicles in 2008. That's fantastic. That means that they had the vision. We all know what it was like. Tesla was trying to do this. And so they went after that, and then they got their funding. And, that's why they're leader now. They were starting the same time that Tesla was.
And it's actually interesting. I don't know whether you've seen my post 10 days ago. They won an energy storage solution in South Africa. So they're working. Remember my Bridge and Road expose on how China is trying to help certain countries in Africa and all over the world. And so BYD is one of those players that does then energy solutions. So these are the same. I mean, not the same, but they are megapack stations linked to solar fields now in South Africa that are on BYD megapacks.
Okay, fantastic. Let's continue on. This is a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so now let's look at their results specifically in the EV space, right? So right now they're offering in total 16 models across plug-in hybrid and BEV, a 50-50 volume split across the price range about $23,000 to $50,000, right? So pretty wide range. And I believe they also been making full advantage of the second mover position because they started their EV business in 2008, just a few years behind Tesla. So in a way, they have Tesla to kind of model after. And since then, they have produced exponential growth, resulting in the same BEV delivery as Tesla in 2023 Q3, but twice the volume if you include the plug-in hybrid, and about the same revenue size by any chance. So basically, what that means is that on average, the average selling price is about half of Tesla's, right? So twice the volume, but same revenue size.
Yeah, and there's actually a nice chart, Herbert, that you should bring up, which shows how long it took Tesla. You know what I just explained? Yeah, this one, what I just explained. So you have on the bottom the number of years it took to do things. So you have in red the Tesla line in quarters. This is in quarters, and then what happened, the different milestones of the company, and how much shorter it was actually for BYD. They did the whole thing the different ways and not as profitable. There are lots of things that are talking for Tesla, and I do believe Tesla still has a huge technical and advantage. But we got to give it to BYD. The speed at which they expanded their business is remarkable.
Yeah, but yes, but this is deliveries per quarter. And so they're selling in the compact car, and
Sure.
so they're going to sell more volume.
Exactly.
So yeah, no,
But I mean,
it's
in a shorter time span, right? In 5 to 8 years, what in volumes took to. But you're right. It's a question of price point. It's also a question of domestic market, because for a very long time it was mainly domestic China.
okay. I'm going to show another slide here. Excuse me. That I like, that came from AJ. And this slide that AJ created, AJ, you can follow him on X at ALOJOH, is an amazing follow. He's creating these slides. So this is Tesla and BYD China sales comparison. And you can see on the right here, this is the one I like, the price points. The red is Tesla's price points. And you can see they range from 37,000 to, what is that? I can't read it, 51,000. These are the red. But you see all of the products that Tesla or BYD sells, all their vehicles, they're all below that. They really don't compete with each other. That's what people need to understand. They're saying, oh, they're selling so many volume and they're equal, but they actually don't sell in the same segment as each other. The question I have you for Frank is, we now know that Tesla's going to do a compact car and they're going to sell something in this range. Now, what will happen to BYD when Tesla competes in this space? But is BYD planning to create cars in the Tesla space?
Absolutely. I think we'll see that very quickly in the slides.
I completely agree with you, Frank. There are actually two things that are happening. Tesla is moving down the price range at the price point, and BYD is moving up. But again, this is in a market where only 20% of buyers currently have a car. So, we shouldn't feel under pressure by BYD. Obviously, competition is always great, but we should really welcome that there is one major player that still has half of it in hybrid. So we hope that they are moving more and more into EVs. But what it helps is the overall goal of EV adoption.
Yeah. There's no competition for many, many years to come. There's just sales galore, and anything either company makes is going to be sold. The other part of his graph was here, where you can see that these are the Tesla models, which is just 3 in total. They make up all of their sales. But look at BYD. They're made up of, like Frank said, 16 models. And there's really, all of them are split tiny little bit. So it's not like they have one brand of car that's totally taken over. They're just doing it based on, different segments. They're hitting every segment you can think of, including
and what this graph is really great is you see that actually the lower volumes of BYD, meaning the lower part of that graph, is where their higher price points are. Their biggest volumes, the top 3, are all in this $15,000 starting range. You see on the first 3-4 cars are all in the lower price range.
Nice. Okay, good. Let's get back to your presentation. I am freaking out, guys. I love what I'm hearing. This is new things. Well, when I first saw Frank's graphs, I was going, "Oh my God, that's too much info." But every graph is interesting and full of info that I'm okay so far. Sorry, Frank. All right, so Frank, show me what's going on here. We've got. I think this is the next slide that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, this is a slide that get the whole Tesla community or the whole EV space across the world, right? Where finally, BYD took over the crown position of EV volume, right? So in Q4 last year, which just passed, so they kind of came in neck and neck with Tesla in Q3, but that didn't really catch a lot of attention. But in Q4, that really caught people's attention.
But remember, Tesla had to shut down production lines for the Model 3 Highland.
That
was mostly in Q3, wasn't it? September.
Yeah, and beginning of Q4. And I don't, I don't think Tesla will catch up again. It's just a completely different market. They're in their local market. They're obviously producing at high rate, and there's a market for it. And there's a market for this $10,000, $15,000, $18,000 car. Can even go to 20. Tesla is not there yet, so they're gonna pull away, and it's fine. There's no problem. Yeah. We have the same goal. BYD and Tesla has the same goal.
Yep, it's just like in a way, and iPhone versus all the other Android phones, right? So if you count by volume, you see a very big difference there. Yeah. So so after volume, then let's take a look at BYD's financial performance, right? So historically, BYD has really been plagued by rather low profit margin, like basically a low single-digit margin with their traditional businesses, batteries, and other things. But over the last couple of years, especially since they cut off their ICE production and started completely focus on EVs. Their margins have been improving steadily, right, through their scale and their operational efficiency. And then finally, in last quarter, they hit 6.4% net profit margin. I believe that's the best profit margin that BYD has ever seen.
Frank, a lot of people have been saying that BYD is propped up by the government and that they're giving them money or something, financial support. Is there truth to that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We know that the Chinese governments, both central and local, do have incentives to the EV market in the form of consumer credits and manufacturing tax rebate, for example. And that's a fairly common practice all over the world when it comes to young and emerging industry. But the devil is in the details. That is whether the practice is considered fair play or considered cross the line that is so egregious that it warrants trade retaliation or some other measures. To answer that question, I believe that we quickly get to the technical details of trade policies and industry policies as defined by the WTO, for example. I'm by no means an expert in that area, so I should probably reserve my judgment there. But at the same time, we should also realize that that determination is not going to be entirely based on technicalities. Politics will play a big role too.
So let's look at the financials of BYD some more.
Yeah, so this is a shot from like Google Finance showing BYD's financial performance over the last 5 quarters. The blue bars are their revenue, and then the yellow bars are their net profit. You can see the revenue is growing nicely, but most importantly is the yellow bar as a proportion of the blue bars. You can see that in last quarter, 2023 Q3, the revenue grew by 38%. And then the net profit margin is 6.4%. And then that was actually 31% better than a year earlier.
It's clearly improving. I just want to add one thing that most people are aware of, but just, by consciousness want to add it. When people purchase BYD or NIO or Xiaopiang stock, they feel it's on the Nasdaq, it's in US dollars. But what you have to understand is the business below is obviously not in US dollars. So you're actually taking a huge currency risk. And lots of the bad performance of the stock of these Chinese car makers is due to the current evolution of the currency. So when you invest, obviously when you invest in Tesla, you have also some currency risk because Tesla has business in Euro and in China and in all the countries they are delivering to. But in these stock, you have a very prominent, important Chinese currency risk.
Okay, good point. All right, let's finish off BYD.
Yeah, BYD, let's look at what I think will be their strategic priorities going forward, right? One is, to your point, to your question exactly, Herbert, that is what are they gonna do in the higher price range, right? So I believe they have already started to move up the value chain, so to speak. They unveiled their first high-end sub-brand called Yangwang, which can translate literally as gaze with respect. And the model
That's what I do for you, Alexandra. I look at you, I Yangwang you.
And I look at you, Herbert, with Yangwang too. And their first model called U8 is a premium SUV, and wait for the price point, which is above $150,000 per car. They unveiled this in September, and the car.
We looked at a lot of pictures. It's stunning car. I'm a Tesla girl, so it's difficult, but it's a stunning car if you like this type of car.
Yeah, it's got some very unique features such as the 360-degree tank turn and a 30-minute emergency water floating. That hopefully we never have to use, but hey, it can become life-saving at certain points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to download it while we're talking. Keep talking. Keep going.
Yeah.
I think the next point is really important, which is their expansion, because they know darn well that in Europe and in America, they're trying to not let them come in. So they're very clever about this.
Yeah. they announced their first factory to be built in Europe, in Hungary next year, or actually this year.
Yeah.
And then the next point, I think, Alexandra, you take a particular interest too, which is around automation. So so far, the founder has not been a full believer in FSD. He actually dismissed it as nonsensical. But at the same time, they're working on other ADAS features such as parking and highway driving. As a matter of fact, Alexandra, you called this out the other day. They obtained the first testing permit for level 3 autonomous driving on highways in July. Right, the first of such a license in China.
And didn't talk about it until December because they obviously are very prudent on this whole subject of FSD, but they were the first one to get it. And I don't know whether they're just sandbagging or what they really don't believe this is coming soon. They're talking about 3 to 5 years. I just want to add one thing to the export expansion. So they are also in talks in Mexico to build a factory. I wouldn't be surprised that there is one announced soon. And the most surprising, and I don't think this will materialize, but who knows, is that they are considering purchasing a factory in Japan. So this one would not be a factory they built, but a factory that is existing, and one of the Japanese car makers wants to sell, and they are in talks to purchase that. So the Japanese government is not convinced yet, but we'll see how that turns out. But their expansion, they understand they will have to do expansions like the Japanese did in the 80s in the United States by setting up plants in the countries they want to sell the cars to, which is difficult for Chinese producers. They have in China production capacities and conditions that they won't be able to replicate neither in Hungary nor in Mexico nor in Japan. That this is going to be a learning curve on their side as well.
I got a couple of questions for you, Frank, and you, Alexandra, because listen, you and I talked about this. This expansion in Hungary that they announced is for cars. At one point, you said, no, it's for batteries. It's for cars.
And it's for cars. It's for sure cars now.
Okay. You admit,
and they were going on, and they were initially going on, well, batteries, and they got actually the permit for batteries, and then they changed the permit to cars, which was clever.
So we were both right. But it's for automobiles, and this is their beachhead into Europe. And like you said, they might actually, there's signs are going to create one in Mexico to have a beachhead in the U.S. Now, is it true, Frank, though, what Jeff Lutz has been saying is that they can create these factories in these countries, but the reason why they're able to create such great, cars is because they're taking advantage of the low cost of employees, right? Labor force in China, which they won't be able to replicate. Plus, they'll need to replicate all of the supply chain. And then let me ask you this question, which is related, which is people are saying that BYD has 600,000 employees and they actually are not automated. Like their factories are not fully automated. So, they don't have FSD and they don't believe in that. But is it true also that they are not as automated as Tesla is in their factories?
I believe that's true, right? Because if you do the economic calculation for any kind of automation, you obviously calculate the investment you have to make for the automation versus the labor cost. Of course, for a low labor cost market, that calculation becomes more difficult, right? So you don't get the ROI, so to speak, by substituting labor cost with the automation investment, right? So I can totally see a place where yes, in China, automation is not as widely adopted, probably mostly for economic reasons. And then to your point about Hungary and Mexico, but you will realize that they didn't pick France as the entry point in Europe either, right? They picked Hungary, which is probably relatively cheap in terms of labor cost, and so is Mexico for North America. So, and at the same time, they're saving logistics costs, right, by cutting out the transportation piece. So it probably comes out a little more expensive than producing locally in China, probably not much more.
Okay. Guess what? I found the video for U8. U8 is $150,000 BYD. This is what they're promoting. So let's take a look at this.
Yes.
Looks okay, Alexandra. It looks great.
A bit too much for me, but I mean, it's going to be a very high-end car in China.
Oh, this is the tank turn. Oh, this
Yeah.
is the
Chugga, 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 chug.
Chugga, chugga.
yeah.
Turn down the music a little bit there. Let's take a look at the inside. Yeah. I don't know if it's worth 150,000 from the outside,
It
but it
feels
looks
like
cool.
BMW and Range Rover had a baby,
Yeah. How come they don't show the inside?
a huge baby.
They don't show the
Wait,
inside
it's
at
coming.
all.
It is
No,
coming now.
it's
No?
not.
Okay.
I've already been flipping around to the end.
Okay. Well,
Nope.
People who buy
All
these
right.
kind of cars don't care about the inside.
thank you for watching.
All right.
Stay here.
Well, we needed to see it because this will be their first entry into the high-end market, or there might be others, because 150,000 is also not competing with Tesla.
Oh no,
Correct.
this is higher.
This is
higher.
more, in my mind,
Go ahead, Frank.
in my mind, this is more of a just like a showcase car where they
I
can
think
show
so.
we can build expensive, high-end, high-performance cars, right? So I don't expect
Yeah.
them to. They expect to sell a huge amount of them, but they just want to show we have the capability. And between 50,000 and 150,000, there's a $100,000 difference. They can stack a lot of models in that range.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay. Good thing we clarified that. So let's take a look at the next thing here, which is Li Auto. Tell me about this one.
You'll hear it straight away. Frank is a big fan of Li Auto. Tell us, Frank.
Really? Really?
Okay, I think Li Auto is actually a very interesting a homegrown startup, so to speak. But let's look at their and they offers unique value propositions, right? Maybe most unique among the dozens of players in the Chinese market. But let's see where they came from. So Li Auto was founded by this guy called Li Xiang, and in 2015, and then 5 years later in 2025, it already got listed on Nasdaq, right? But this guy Li Xiang, he also
Says
founded
2020.
2020.
Mhm.
And then the founder Li Xiang also founded AutoHome, probably one of the largest auto portal in the world in 2005, and listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2013. I think this experience really honed his deep understanding of the car market in China, which allowed him to actually design his EV product in a very unique way. So what are the unique value propositions of the autos cars? First, for any new product to break through, you need a killer use case, so to speak, right? So what's Li Auto's killer use case? It's the mid to high-end mobile home to satisfy possibly 3-generation family needs, right? Through a lot of their very unique family-friendly features. And then at the same time, they started with extended range EV technology rather than a pure EV technology, just because of the reality on the ground in China in terms of the charging availability, right?
Yeah.
So let me just kind of speak a little bit about the extended range EV technology. Here, this is the graph that kind of showcased their family use cases, right? So all their marketing materials about family playing together, enjoying time in the car, right? A true mobile home, so to speak.
It's
And
like a
then
van, and vans took off in the US. This is fantastic. I love this. Okay, I get it.
And then if you go back to the slide on the product, the footnote I thought is worth highlighting here because there's certain stigma or misunderstanding associated with a plug-in hybrid. So the extended range EV is kind of it's a type of plug-in hybrid, but it's also different. Basically, it comes with an electric motor. So it's an electric motor powered car with a 43 kilowatt battery, which goes for over 200 kilometer range. It also has a small ICE, which can function as an alternative energy source, but also electric generator. So basically, how this works is that you charge up your car, you drive for 200 kilometers. In case you cannot find a charger at that point, then the ICE kicks in and generate electricity for you and charge the battery up for you, and then you can keep driving. But then if you can't find a charger, then you just charge up your battery, right? So I think, considering the reality on the ground is actually a pretty smart
think
entry
so.
into the EV space. What do you think?
Oh, I brilliant use of the, so it's not really ICE, but it's there to support the EV. That's fantastic. And like you said, particularly in China, when they have a supercharger network isn't as fully
Yeah.
built out yet.
Yeah, and then also like given that the topology of in China where it's mostly high rises in metropolitan areas, right? Some of the high rises are also pretty old. So you can imagine the challenge of installing chargers in these old high rises versus in the US where you have single home ownership widespread, right? Where it's fairly easy to install your own charger at home, right? So
Yeah.
I think, both of these points showcase the deep understanding of the founders of the Chinese market. And then if you look at their models, so far they have four this extended range EVs, these family SUVs, and they also do a direct to consumer sales model with the average selling price of $45,000. These cars are all 5 to 6 seaters. Come with their self-developed ADAS system. And the last one, which is interesting, that is that the Chinese government is trying to promote birth rates in China, and then as a result, Li Auto played to that, and they are jokingly called the milk daddy's vehicle. What that means is basically saying that hey, these cars are mostly used for stay-home dads who feed their babies, during the week, and then chauffeur the family around during the weekends, right? And they do that because there are a lot of family-friendly features, such as a lot of big space in the cabin, a mini fridge in the car, star-grade massage chairs, and then advanced infotainment, double bed extensions, and high-quality air expansions. Don't you want to do some carpool karaoke with your family in your car? How about that?
Oh yeah. Well, you can do that with Tesla now. We do it.
You do it?
Look at that. Yeah, we do carpool. We do karaoke in the
We do
car.
karaoke.
Tesla.
Yeah, we do too.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Brilliant. Okay, let's see how they're doing results wise.
Yeah, let's look at their results, right? So this is kind of their volume over the last 4 years.
So did you explain that they are going after fully electric soon as well, right? At the moment, it's these mixed solutions with the extensions.
Yeah, we'll come to that in the next slide. So yes, you can see the exponential growth curve with Li Auto, and then there's some kind of acceleration towards the end as well. And particularly if you look at their last month's delivery, they crossed the 50,000 mark, right? That represented 137% year-on-year growth and 23% month-over-month growth. That's fantastic, right? That's just the true definition of exponential growth, so to speak.
There's no channel stuffing because these guys are selling direct to consumer, right?
Correct.
These guys are really going to do it. Okay.
Then let's look at their financial results, right? So they have already achieved consistent profitability for the last 4 quarters. And in last quarter, they actually achieved 8.1% net profit margin, which if you recall the profit margin for Tesla in that quarter, it was actually a 7.9. So in general, I say Li Auto is probably the second most profitable EV maker in the world, but occasionally the most profitable. But of course, Tesla does many more things than Li Auto, right? They do Dojo and batteries and Optimus, and Li Auto is only pure EVs. But but still, it's remarkable that they were able to achieve 8.1% net profit margin in last quarter. And given the volume in Q4, I bet that they'll have a better profit margin in this quarter.
Keep going.
Yep. Now going back to Alexandra's question about their plan about pure battery EVs, I believe one of their strategic priorities going forward is actually getting to the pure BEV space, right? So they have already unveiled their first BEV model. It's a family multi-purpose vehicle called Mega in November. It will be on sale at the beginning of March this year with a price of $70,000 US, which is equivalent to $500,000 RMB in China. And their overall plan is to launch 4 new models in 2024, including 1 extended range and 3 BEVs. And by 2025, they want to have a full lineup of 11 models with 1 super flagship and 5 extended range and 5 BEVs. Right? And then at the same time, they have started to invest heavily in autonomous driving. They established their own AI reference chip R&D team of 160 members across China, Silicon Valley, and Singapore, and then released their own autonomous driving solution for beta testing in second quarter last year, and they rolled out to 100 cities nationwide by the end of last year. So they're taking maybe a second mover advantage approach, but they're moving fast and moving aggressively.
I agree, and I think with Xiaopeng, they're probably the leaders in the full self-driving space at the moment. The others are, I mean, like I said, BYD may be sandbagging, but from what's visible, they are certainly in the top 3.
Yeah, and then their CEO is now shy about their ambition, right? He announced the 1.6 million sales goal in 2 years, and they want to become the number 1 seller, including ICEs, for the $70,000 plus bucket, right? So if I can summarize the strategy here, that is, if I can use analogy from Elon's master plans, basically this guy has a master plan 1, which is sell extended range vehicles and become profitable and become recognized brand, and then move into BEVs. So now they're actually implementing master plan 2, and they have set up specific model and volume goals. So this guy knows what he's doing.
I think I know what their master plan part 3 is, which is they're headed into autonomous driving, but they're ahead of the game because they designed their vehicle to be a dedicated robotaxi. You've got entertainment inside. It's plenty of room. It's like a party in there. And once you don't have to drive, it's like, that's what they've been doing, is working the experience of driving in a car and having, joy during the journey.
Bachelorette parties in the Li Auto car.
What?
Bachelorette parties in the mega car.
No, it's not. It's families. It's fathers taking care of their children. Come on.
How could I forget?
That's master plan part 4.
So now you can see that why I'm kind of excited about the Auto, right? Because of the unique value proposition, and it's the deep insights the founder has about the EV market.
Frank, he just tapped right into you, a father, milk family. You want to take care of your family on long rides. He just hit you right, just you.
Yeah. If I buy one, it's gonna be the Auto.
Okay, just to clarify to everybody watching, Frank is a long-term Tesla investor since 2016, significant investment. He wants Tesla to succeed, so it's okay
Absolutely.
to like other EVs. It's okay. All right, let's talk about Huawei. They're interesting. Let's share the information here.
Yeah, Huawei is probably the most fascinating and globally recognized Chinese company, right? So it's huge. It's got $100 million sales every year. $100 billion. Yeah, I just downgraded by an order of magnitude. But anyways, $100 billion sales. It's got a fascinating history as well. It's also controversial in many ways. So let's take a look at it. It was founded in 1987 by an ex-military officer with $5,000 making phone switches. Yeah. How do you think about that origin? And they moved into telecom communication equipment in the 90s and became one of the largest providers and famous for their cost-effective, innovative solutions. And then they did a bunch of global extension in 2000s, establishing offices around the world and became a major global player in that space. And starting in 2010, they started facing some regulatory controversies, and mostly in the U.S., who have proclaimed concerns around their alleged ties to the Chinese military. In 2010, they also expanded into the consumer electronics space, particularly smartphones, and became quickly one of the largest smartphone makers in the world, and including the high end. And then to continue their leadership in the telecommunication space, they became the leader in 5G and contributed significantly to the global rollout of the 5G technology. And then coming back to the regulatory controversy, the US government under Donald Trump actually implemented sanctions specifically on Huawei, basically preventing them from doing business in certain ways, and also basically cutting them off from some key technologies, including Google's Android operating system, right? So all these sanctions, of course, made their life very, very difficult and became existential threat to them. And of course, the company has to pivot. And where did they pivot? They actually pivot to EV market, right? So they not only invented their own operating system called Harmony OS, but also diversified into cloud and AI. And as I mentioned, applying their Harmony operating system to the EV market too.
Watch Huawei, I can tell you.
Why do you say that?
Because they're hungry. They want this market. And they're coming with a smartphone approach to the car market. You know,
Gotcha.
what we usually see is these OEMs trying to adapt, and we realize that that's a failure. Then now we have these battery makers like BYD that understood the game, but from the battery side. But Huawei comes from a smartphone tech approach, and you will see in a second. This is impressive what they're rolling out.
Okay.
And just to tag along on that point, I think Huawei also is probably the most internationally experienced Chinese company at this point. Right? Just to illustrate that point, this graph shows Huawei's global presence for their cloud business. You can see they are pretty well covered, especially in the emerging markets, whether it's Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Right? So down the road, I can totally see them leveraging their international network for their EV business.
Belt and Road, here we go again.
Yeah.
Same map, remember, Herbert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and they have adopted also a pretty unique strategy when it comes to EV. So they actually entered the EV market last year with a two-pronged approach to leverage their tech expertise, their brand recognition, and the global presence I just mentioned. First, they had this, the first prong was actually a partnership or Huawei Inside approach, where they do tech licensing for their ADAS, their DriveOne platform, and their battery management system. Right? So basically, they partner up with other OEMs and put their technology inside. And then the second prong is actually a closer collaboration where they co-develop EV models and co-market them so that they don't take on the burden of the direct manufacturing. And so far, they have forged two close collaborations and launched two models in the market. One is their collaboration with Series, which we looked at earlier, among the top 10 the top players by volume. Series is a private enterprise in Chongqing, a place famous for this hot pot. And they have launched two models so far. One is called M5, and the other is M7. Both of them are extended range with an average selling price of $40,000. And I believe they crossed $28,000 volume in December. They're targeting averagely $30,000 deliveries in 2024. And then the second co-developed brand is called Luxeed with Chery, which is another pretty large private enterprise car maker in China.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting how you see how these Aito picked up this M5 and M7s. The second they had the product ready and the distribution sorted out, because you'll see, we'll get into distribution in a second, they were very competitive straight away, and good selling cars, obviously hitting what the consumer is waiting for. And then this is it. So they're selling them. It's as if you would go in an Apple store and have a car there. That's how they sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also have very ambitious plans of opening up 800 direct sales EV stores in 2024. So I think as Alexandra mentioned, Huawei is going to be a force to be reckoned in the EV space globally very quickly.
Okay. I like the way you positioned it, that they are a tech company first, mobile phone company first. That's what we needed, not the legacy auto. It's these guys. So don't count them out. Keep an eye on them. Okay, let's talk about China export. So this is something that many of us, when I interviewed, who was it, Alexandra? Nicholas Colas?
Nick Colas, yes.
Yeah. He was saying he's got tremendous auto industry. He's a Wall Street expert. And he said that he does not believe the Chinese will be able to make beachheads in Europe or the US. There's going to be kind of protectionism that the countries will prevent that from happening. What do you think? Tell us what your thoughts are, Frank.
Yeah, so let's take a look at where they are at this point, and then we can come to where they want to go in the future, and then some of the regulatory headwinds that they might have to encounter going forward. But so far, I think that they have done pretty well when it comes to export, but it's still very early in the game, right? But already, if you look at the overall auto sales, not just EV, but the total auto sales, including ICEs, China has already overtaken Japan as the largest export market, right? So in Q3, China exported 4.4 million cars. That is 58% year-on-year growth versus Japan's 3.99 million cars and 15% year-on-year growth. So in Q3, China overtook Japan.
Yeah, so this is a shocking stat. Yeah, sorry,
it's
a shocking stat because nobody would tell you today that China is the largest auto export country, right? They wouldn't say that.
Let me tell you where they go. So about 750,000 of those go to Russia. That's the first export market. So that's why you obviously don't see it so much on our side. The second export market is Mexico, and they're not coming yet into the United States. The third one is Belgium. So it's quite interesting how they are currently allocated. They're going to Australia, they're going to certain African countries, but don't forget the first market is Russia.
Wow. Okay, keep going.
Yep, there's geopolitical headwind and there's also geopolitical tailwind, so to speak. So about 1/3 of their export volume is actually EVs, but about 1/2 of the export value is actually EV. So basically, on average, the EVs are selling more expensively than ICEs. So that's obviously a good thing. Tesla contributed to about 40% of China's export. Okay. Yeah, so that's something good to know. And so far, they've mostly been selling based on value for money, right? So pretty affordable price with a lot of features. And then this is a chart credited to Alexandra on her X posting. It's comparing the distribution of the cars available across price ranges. As you can see that on left-hand side, the blue bars, China has a large amount of EV models below the $30,000 price range, versus in Europe and US, they are mostly in the higher price buckets.
Yeah, and that's also typical if you think about their first two markets. Obviously, both in Russia and in Mexico, you will sell the cheaper cars first.
Cheaper cars. Yeah. That's one of the suggestions that people are saying, that in order for China to break into the US and Europe market, they have to go high end. They have to show that they're not cheap cars. They have to show that they're not for value. This is premium. That's what these people are, buyers are looking for.
In Europe, they're trying that. And in Europe, the one difficulty they have, just to add this quickly, is distribution cost. Because in Europe, you can't just sell a car and have no maintenance place or have no, there has to be something has to be there. So they have to partner with the distributions that is existing there, the German distribution points, and they want to be remunerated. And that's where they're losing their price advantage.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so I think going forward, there will be definitely more to come on the export front, right? Some of the EV players have already established beachheads, as we just talked about, right? The BYDs, the GDs, the NIOs of the world. Their beachheads so far are mostly in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and certain parts in Europe, such as Turkey and Russia. And BYD, as we just talked about, is going to build a factory in Hungary this year. Leapmotor is going to export to Europe through Stellantis partnership. And Huawei, of course, will lend its own global reach to its EV partners, right, in due course. So I believe that this movie is only getting started.
Completely agree. And just to add one, for example, Polestar is part of the Volvo partnership. That's how they can get currently into the United States. So these partnerships often allow Chinese car makers use quotas that these European car makers have for the United States to import cars, even though they usually would have to take the 25% tariff on it. Also, I wanted to add, if you put back that map, earlier I said the first market is Russia. Well, Russia, they're not selling EVs. So when I talk about Russia being their first export market, it's for all cars. Obviously, still a lot of ICE. The ICE cars go to Russia. The ICE cars still go to Mexico. The EVs go to Australia, Brazil, and where you see in the European countries that you see on this map.
Yeah. This is, again, a shocking thing that I did not know. I'm sure most people did not know that these companies are already going global and exporting, and they're here. Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East, like you said. We just don't see it. I mean, in Europe and US, and we think,
but I mean, take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because the turquoise color is less than 1,000 cars, and the dark blue is more than 1,000 cars. So this is still very small volumes.
All right.
Yeah, I think this is important I know it's a lot of text, but this is important to understand. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. Quickly, I just did a quick SWOT analysis for the China EV export. Right, just look at the overall picture from a strategic point of view. So if you look at their strengths, so obviously they have very rich manufacturing experience, robust supply chain, whether it's batteries and components, and they have relatively cheap labor. And on the people front, they have extremely innovative people working on functionalities and user experience, extremely driven and experienced entrepreneurs, like we have just seen just now. And they have ample engineering talent, right? And they have a huge domestic market to actually help them scale. Right? So these are the strengths that the high on my list when it comes to China EV maker for export. And their weaknesses are also pretty obvious, I think. They have relatively poor brand recognition outside of China. They lack the distribution channel outside of China. They are rather inexperienced outside of China. And in my mind, they also don't have enough the best of the best R&D talent when it comes to autonomous driving or autonomous manufacturing. They have a lot of very good talents, but they don't have the best of the best, so to speak. And they can also be short-term oriented given the cutthroat competition situation at home, right? So when you are surviving every day, you cannot afford to be too strategic and long-term, right?
Very
of course,
important
that can be hurtful to you in the long run. And if you come to opportunities, there's obviously the global electrification trend, and there's the digitization trend, and there's the whole wave of AI and autonomous driving. And then specific to China, given the current economic pressure, the slowdown of the economy, the Chinese government will be looking for places where they can double down on, right? And EV is definitely one of the bright spots they can throw their full body weight behind. So in terms of threat, we touched on some of these also already. There's the trade barrier situation. There's a geopolitical risk like Huawei experienced a few years ago. And in my mind, there's also the over competition at home, right? When you have several dozen players trying to jostle in a limited space, the competition can be damaging in my mind, right? So so basically this is kind of the SWOT in my mind about the China EV export movement, so to speak. What do you guys think?
Sums it up perfectly, Frank. Really does.
It's a good long list on both sides. I was just trying to think if I've thought of anything that you didn't include in here or something big, important. I think you can probably sum them up into, 1 or 2 points here and here. But I think it's really is the strength and opportunities probably outweigh the weakness and threats as far as I'm concerned. I really do think the Chinese automakers are going to make a beachhead and they're going to be able to make a go at it. I'm on one side of it, and a few people think they're not going to be able to make it to the U.S.
And one opportunity they have.
But I agree with what Elon said, right? Top player is going to be Tesla. The next 9 are going to be Chinese auto.
Exactly. And that's the opportunity they have. The legacies are just so far behind. So far behind in software, so far behind in battery, everything. So that they have their window and they're using it at a speed. It's impressive. It really is.
Yeah. Well, that's why we did this. Okay, so let's finish off with what to watch for in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very dynamic and complex market, and there are many things happening at the same time. Every day, if you watch the Chinese media, there's a new model launched or refreshed. Right? It can be very daunting just to keep track of everything. But at a high level, if you look at the big items, these are the things on my mind. Right? For domestic growth, they have already crossed the 40% penetration rate. I'm sure they will cross the 50%, which is a big milestone, right? So the question is when, not whether.
Mm-hmm.
My projection is probably somewhere in Q3 or late Q3 or early Q4.
This year.
See. Yeah. Wow. So which means that more than half of the car sales in China will be EV.
Symbolic, but important.
Yep. And then competition, right? So everybody says there's a price war going on. Then if there is, then I think that it will lead to some industry consolidation. Not everyone is going to survive among such a tough market. Will it take place in 2024? Let's see. And then globalization, how much of an inroad will they be able to make, especially in the US and EU, as we just talked about? And then specific for BYD, how will it move up the value chain after a young one? After you gaze with respect, what do you do next? So, yeah. Li Auto, how will their first batch of BEVs perform? Remember, they want to roll out 4 completely new BEV models this year. Let's see how they perform in their second act, their master plan too. And Huawei, how will their partnership keep expanding? And Xiaomi, we didn't really talk about Xiaomi, but it's actually a very interesting company. It's kind of the Apple of China. Founded by this rather successful entrepreneur, Lei Jun. They have been building EVs behind closed doors over the last several years, and they unveiled their first EV model, the SU7, on December 28th, and it's widely considered the Apple car in China. So let's see how they perform, whether they're going to be able to make any inroad in already a very, very crowded space. And then lastly,
I don't recall. Did we get a price for that car in the end? Because I remember it looks like the Taycan, the Porsche, a very impressive car. Yep. But they didn't announce a price. Did they follow up with a price already or not yet?
Not yet. They want to keep their price to the last minute, I suppose.
Okay.
Just like what Tesla did with their Cybertruck. And then last point, which is maybe a pet peeve for myself, which is whether Tesla going to start doing some product localization in China, right? Because China, Tesla's been doing pretty well in China, but there's also some fair criticism in my mind about China's offering, which is mostly around its interior looks in China. It's considered pretty Spartan, and some people like that look, but some people find it too bare. So I think for Tesla to expand its TAM in China, something easy they can do is actually to beef up their interiors. But I'm not sure that Elon has the appetite for that, or at this point. So that's something we have to watch down the road.
I think the thing to think about that is kind of all solidified for me, everything you just did. Fantastic info. There's so much I didn't know. The big one is the competition. Tesla in China, the automakers, there's many of them. And what's happening is all the weak players are dying and all the strong players are having to compete with each other. But the market is growing so quickly, 50% and others, that the market is growing. The thing is, when you have tremendous competition, everybody gets better and the prices fall down. It reminds me of what happened with Hong Kong, Alexandra, the restaurant. So people in Hong Kong don't have kitchens. And so they all eat out. all of them, Monday to Saturday. And so all these restaurants popped up, of course, and they have to be cheap because this is not a once a week activity. This is a daily activity. And there's so many competition that if you don't compete, you die. That's why you have the best food coming from the Hong Kong restaurants and the great value. They're very affordable. That's what's going to happen with the electric vehicles. We got to watch out for them because they're so deep in competition. All right. Future's bright. This is brighter. Thanks, Brad.
I want to circle back to kind of the how we started with the presentation, which is Elon's prediction about Tesla being still the leader, but followed by 9 Chinese companies. After this presentation, hopefully people get a better sense of why he's made the statement he did. Right? There's actually maybe some validity to that prediction, and it might not be exactly 9. It might be 4 or 5, but still,
It's going to be 9.
And nobody would have seen it come 5 years ago. Nobody. I mean, this is impressive. This is impressive on the side of the Chinese who had
no
pandemic to digest, who have a weak economy for a lot of other subjects, and who are pulling this EV out of it. I have to say, this is really impressive. I mean, you may like the Chinese, you may whatever, but you have to say this is really impressive.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have seen this movie before, which is the Japanese, the Korean cars back in the 80s and 90s, right? So this is a kind of a similar movie playing the EV space with a little more twist on the geopolitical front. We'll see how history. Yeah, people say history always rhymes and never repeats, right? So this is a rhyming of the Japanese story. But going back to the future is bright thing, we just talked about. At the end of the day, Tesla is still going to be the leader, right? So that's very bright for us at that level. And then if you take a step back, look at the whole industry, look at Tesla's mission of accelerating the sustainable energy transition by having the Chinese players competing with the Tesla and others, it was just pushing the industry forward with so much more value to be offered to the consumers. And that's good for the transition. And at that level, the future is bright too. So I think it's all good.
I agree with you. And one thing I want to add is it's actually a shame that we don't see European or American or even the new Americans, the Rivians and whatever, being competitive to that point. Because the Rivian has about the same lifespan in some of these Chinese companies, and they're just not having the same offer at the moment available. And I mean, there are good reasons for it, but it is impressive on the Chinese.
There's 2 things that can happen that can just completely blow away everything we just said. The first one is autonomy. So let's say Tesla creates autonomy. Let's say that they're far ahead from everyone else. Cars now become robotaxi. And now you're going to want to buy a car that has the capable of robotaxi.
And there are in China. They are far ahead from all the others. I'm not saying they're to the point than Tesla is, but for the Chinese market, they are building up what they can in robotaxis.
Yes, scenario 1 is Tesla's robotaxi is so far ahead of everyone else that you can catch up. Tesla scenario 2 is Tesla gets it, and then other Chinese automakers copy it too, and then now the game moves from just EVs, it becomes autonomy. The game so the board set.
Yeah.
The other thing that's different is this obviously reminds everybody of Apple and Android, and you've got Tesla, and then you've got these Chinese automakers, which is a bunch of Androids, right? The difference this time around is Tesla's willing to license. And so if Tesla license and they're working on automation, they're working on unbox model, making everything cheaper, maybe they could license, and then maybe it can undercut some of the Chinese advantages.
You mean the factory
automation, or just licensing their, unbox model, and you put your car on top. And so they could actually compete with the Chinese automakers as well, create multiple models. These are things that could play out over the next 5-10 years. Never know.
My thoughts are much more that they're actually going to help the legacies in Europe and the United States, because the market will probably, the Tesla will help the European and American OEMs, because they won't be able to have the whole Chinese infrastructure here. I don't think that a GM car can have the SIAC setup sold in the United States. It's just politically, I don't see how this could be acceptable. But we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Frank and Alexandra. Appreciate you guys doing all this work. It is great. This is a presentation I think every Tesla investor must see. You need to understand the competition, as we've been saying, and you guys kind of nicely wrapped it up. Lots of info. Appreciate you both. Everybody needs to see this. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. And then follow Frank at what's your
Ming Dynasty.
Ming Dynasty, and he's on X at MFU007. Love it. Ming Dynasty MFU007.
Yep.
Oh my God, I like that. And then of course there's TeslaBoomerMama. You got to follow her. Thanks everybody. See you soon. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.